Okay, looks like the video was about 33 minutes, so either you're watching this Thursday or you can proceed by watching the rest of this now. Again, it's my fault for not running a timer. It's stupid. All right, so if you wind up with not the same number of chromosomes, i.e., 23 pairs, that is typically because of what we define as a non-disjunction. And so that is when we have a failure to separate, more or less, in meiosis 1, or a failure of sister chromatids to separate in meiosis 2. Really, it's a failure to separate, period, is what it is. Non-disjunction, does not unjoin, is what that's saying. So either the homologous pairs in meiosis 1 don't go to each side and then form cells, or the sister chromatids don't separate into those four, and so they stay together. And so if that happens, then all of that data is going to be given to whatever that next cell is versus being half and half, okay? And so you can kind of see how that's not a good situation. Here's a good example of that. In this case, here's a non-disjunction. So follow here. Look at what you've got. You should have a N222 is what you should have. You should have 2 in each of these spots. Instead, you wound up with only half the data you needed in the last 2, and you wound up with too much data in the ones before. And so that's why you have an N-1 on the right side and your N+1s on the left. So just know some general ideas about non-disjunction so that you would get that on a test question if it were to be asked. In other words, XXY was created. What was the cause of that? Non-disjunction would be a good example of that, okay? Here's it occurring in meiosis 2. So on the right side, everything is normal. Notice on the left, you have a +1 and a -1. That's going to happen every time that happens because it didn't give one away to the other side before it actually went through cytokinesis, and one side held on to more information than it was supposed to, okay? So notice the idea of a karyotype, okay? It is pretty much a picture of all of our chromosomes, right, more or less. To prepare those, you are going to take white blood cells. They're going to be isolated. They're stimulated to grow. They're arrested at metaphase, and then photographed under a microscope. That's the way to see our entire karyotype. They're going to be arranged in ordered pairs so that any abnormalities could be seen. In other words, if we happen to have a non-disjunction, it would show up. If you only had half of that, you wouldn't be able to get that situation that is there. So this is how we take blood and separate it into white blood cells. It's very simple in a centrifuge. Not a complicated endeavor there for us. We are then going to take all of that information and look at it, and you can see even on the screen here a good example of what's being drawn out from this, and here you go. Here is a karyotype right here. Look at your centromeres, your sister chromatids, your pair of homologous chromosomes. So all of these things are in pairs, so they contain the same amount, the same genetic information. You can very easily see how those things not only are paired together, but you can also see how they sometimes look differently to each other, which does happen even though they carry the same genetic information that is there. And so, of course, this is seen for us, very simple to understand. Of course, your XY chromosome is written down there for you. That is why there's not a 23. Okay, goes to 22, and then your 23rd is technically considered to be XY, which is our sex cells, XX for females, XY for males. So trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome. Most of you know at least something about Down syndrome. You've seen patients that have Down syndrome. Most of the time, very, very energetic and fun people to be around. I have a few patients of mine that were Down syndrome patients and a few friends of mine, 2 of which actually have Down syndrome children. And they are fantastic kids to love and to care for. They do struggle with things just because of the issue itself, but it is defined as trisomy, which is 21 for a reason, and you can see that here. So in our 21st chromosome, we wound up with, instead of having 2, we actually now have a 3rd set, and that is what causes this this issue that occurs for not a large amount of population, but of all of the actual disjunctions, it is probably one of the more common that is there. So the non-disjunction of sex chromosomes during meiosis can result in individuals with a missing or extra X or Y. So this would be the same idea. So if, for instance, they were XXY, this leads to syndromes that can affect the health of the individual. In other cases, if they're XXX, they are completely normal. It doesn't bother them at all. We're not going to go into these syndromes. You don't have to know these things for my test. You were just fine. Okay. So just think about the ideas of non-disjunction and how that could affect us. Don't care about our connections to evolution. They mean nothing to me in the slightest. Chromosome breakage can lead to rearrangements, deletions, duplications, inversions, and translocations. So you could see how that would take place. Here's a deletion. So in other words, we cut out a gene, okay, which didn't help. You could see an example here where we duplicated a section of the gene. That didn't help. Again, this would be nice if it gave us, superpowers and we could, I don't know, throw a web, or whatever else, climb a building. But when these things typically happen, they normally create some pretty adverse effects in our bodies, and it doesn't wind up being very good for us. Here's an inversion where we wound up having kind of an opposite order of the same two genes of each other. And then here's a reciprocal translocation. You can just see some examples of these things. I want you to get just a concept on this test. If I were to ask you about some of these things, what their effects could be, you would be able to tell me that these things could very much be detrimental to our current genetic structure. I'm not asking you to memorize the 4 things that are here for my test at all. Okay, so hopefully you have all this information in your head. I know this test seems very difficult as far as the total amount of information. I'm going to do everything in my power, and I think I've been honest with you up to this point. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that the multiple choice questions, that the majority of them are based on mitosis and meiosis issues. Because if you understand those things, you can do the short answer. And if you can do those things, then you can turn around and kind of use that information for your multiple choice as well. So it kind of be a back check for you to kind of keep things where they're supposed to be. Okay. All right. Hopefully they're going to play this video right after the first one. I'm going to make that request. So technically tomorrow you should be doing your homework in my class. We'll have talked about this on Monday and Tuesday so that I can verify it has or hadn't been done by everybody. But we'll be working on that on Thursday. And then on Friday, you have a test. And I will not have it graded probably when I see you on Monday. So you just got to get over that. But I will miss you greatly for the next few days. Look forward to seeing you guys. And then we'll figure out what the deal is. I should know by the time I see you what the deal is with our classes on the following week after next week. Okay? All right. God bless you guys. I'm going to see if I can close.